It's 9 a.m. This is April the 4th. This is the Budget and Finance Committee for the Recreation Centers of Sun City West. And my name is Dick Rhodes, and I'm the chairman of the committee. I'd like to call the meeting to order. And if you could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. All the members of the committee are here, so we have established a quorum. I'd like to present the minutes from March the 21st. If there are no objections to it, I wish to forward the minutes to the governing board. So be it. No objections. Okay, the first item on our new business is will be presented actually by Mr. Schwend. It is the proposed 23-24 budget draft review and the latest revisions. So, Mr. Schwend, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Chairman Rhodes, members of the board, and all you in attendance. Thank you for coming. This is going to be a presentation for the upcoming fiscal year, a little summary of where we've been and where we're going, and hopefully have some good discussion hereafter. So a couple of changes to the budget since we began this process. There's a lot of moving parts, obviously, and so I just want to talk a little bit about some changes that have been implemented in here, and that is a couple of scheduling software upgrades have taken place or needing to take place. There's a $14,500 increase being proposed. Our property and liability insurance policy is seeing a 7% increase. That equates to about $24,000. We removed the range ball increase impact of a couple of dollars relative to people using range balls, so $50,000 was deducted there. We are proposing a little bit higher increase to our APF fees to $5,000, which generates an additional $300,000 for us. Looking at golf credit card fees, basically they continue to be absorbed as a cost of doing business in the golf world. That's been going on ever since we've implemented the program, and we want to continue to do that. And then we're adjusting our golf rounds due to actual play. Through February, we're reducing that 2,500 rounds, which equates to about $85,000. I'm sorry. My clicker doesn't seem to be working. Thank you. We threw in a little slide here to talk about this winter or this fall program. It hasn't been overly joyful when it comes to golf playing as far as frost delays and rain and washouts and those types of things. So we are seeing, going back comparatively to last year, for instance, it's about double as far as the number of days that we've had a little bit of setback, whether they're complete restrictions or frost delays. So that does have a financial impact on what we do. And so talking about golf and the importance of golf, again, it's our number 2 revenue generating source here as far as any kind of levers to pull, kind of balancing our budget and making this kind of operational. When I came on board a few years ago, actually, one of my goals was to have golf operations kind of pay for itself, right? Where are we with that? We came very, very, very close a year ago, actually 2 years ago. And it was really the offset of forest fires, the pandemic, those types of things that kind of jacked rates up a little bit. Oregon got hit big time on their grass seed market. And so, unfortunately, I think the real teetering point there was really the cost of grass seed. If grass seed were to stay normal or rise, with a shorter percentages, I think we would have been in the black operationally. Unfortunately, that was not the case, and we're still trying to fight that battle. But I do want to share with you a little commercial break here, a video when it talks about the importance of golf. And I know we're going to move forward and talk about water. But if I could just share this with you, I think this is very important. And we're going to feature this in our presentations to the general public when we do our forums. But if you could just only take 2 minutes, but but I think it's really kind of impressive as to where we are.
Hi, I'm Carrie Dozer. As a longtime Arizonan, like you, I'm seeing a lot of headlines claiming Arizona is running out of water. The experts know that we're not, at least not for a very long time. I'm even more alarmed that people who don't know the facts are saying it's the golf industry that's to blame. That's just not true. The golf industry only uses 2% of Arizona's water. 2%. In return, the golf industry generated an economic impact of $6 billion for the state in 2021. That's 16 million rounds of golf. In fact, a study released this year determined that golf in Arizona supported more than 66,000 jobs that paid $2.3 billion in wages and generated $520 million in tax revenue for the state. The economic contribution of the golf industry study also points out how much golf helps our tourist industry, with nearly 1 out of every 10 tourists playing golf during their visit. Arizona's golf industry also drives hundreds of millions of dollars to local nonprofits like Hospice of the Valley, Boys and Girls Clubs, and Special Olympics. All by itself, the WM Phoenix Open raised $10 million for Phoenix charities in 2022. And since 2012, it's raised $110 million for charity. Youth golf programs in Arizona provide opportunities for more than 200,000 kids every year through the First Tee, Youth on Course, and the Junior Golf Association of Arizona, among others. Plus, these programs help students to maintain their physical and mental health, and they teach valuable life skills like respect, honesty, integrity, and accountability. What's more, the golf industry, it's actually good for the environment. Sure, golf courses are beautiful to look at, but they also help to mitigate the effects of urban heat islands because of their abundant tree cover and open green spaces, all while maintaining a valuable habitat for many of our native plants and animals. As we come together to work through the many challenges we face when it comes to our water future, it's important to consider all the vital pieces that make Arizona the place we love. Golf is one of those pieces, one that gives back to Arizona and makes it a better place to live for those who play and for those who have never picked up a club. Golf is good for everyone.
Thank you for your patience on that one, but it's good. And golf really, really has an impact here locally, obviously, but it does help sell homes, and that's important to us. So, I went the wrong way. So, as a bit of a brief summary, right? The B&F committee has kind of recommended to the governing board kind of a range of potential rate fees reflective in this year's budget, right? And the bottom line is our reserve fund impact and where we are. And a 4% increase in fees basically gets our fully funded balance to about 50%, right? And it would produce a $7 million increase in our reserve fund for a total balance of $29 million. But back when these decisions, what we were talking about, it also included $300,000 in membership coming in off of the credit card charges. And so these are just kind of little layouts that Cliff put together relative to the range of fees, 3.5%, 5.1, and 4.1, just to kind of see what that really does to our reserve fund and our fully funded balance. And this does not want to work. Okay. So we did some comparison to the best retirement communities in the United States. We are very, very proud and very, very lucky to be one of the top 10. So that is a wonderful thing in and of itself. So when we look at top 10 communities across the nation, this is where we sit as far as individual rates, as far as annual dues go. And I think the one word that comes to mind here is for everything that we offer, we're a bargain, an absolute bargain at what we do and what we have here. So in our bylaws at Sun City West, we have a particular clause that talks about how much we can increase our annual dues by. So we have a ceiling of 15%. The state of Arizona and HOAs and that type of thing, the state law says 20%, but our bylaws here limit us to 15. What we don't have is a floor. What we have, oftentimes going back 20 years, is the blue line fluctuation of where our fees go. They oftentimes can go as high as 15% and back down to when the pandemic was around in 21, 22, we didn't raise our fees at all. Yet the inflation rate, be it the red line, kind of shows where things are in the environment as far as our operational costs go and what things really cost. So we would really like to basically marry our inflation or our dues to the inflation product, right? We obviously have expenses in the real world, and we want to make sure that we are healthy and able enough to continue doing what we're doing. So when it comes to the CPI and inflation, right, that is measured, and the inflation rate basically is a change between 2 points in time. Over time, since the CPI was basically brought on board back in 1914, the average rate is about 3.26%. But over the last couple of years, you can see that's particularly higher. And so that's something that we focus on. This is really what things cost in the real market, whether we're buying grass seed, chlorine, all kinds of product that we use. But if we were to apply that CPI average to our annual dues, you can see what our actual dues were dating back to 2014. And if we were to apply a CPI average for a 2-year average or a 3-year average, you can see that we would be right pretty much where we are now, without a whole lot of fluctuations, take the political activity out of the air. You know, this is the reality. This is what things cost, and this is where we should be. So we've looked at the 3 ranges that this board has recommended to the governing board. And, you know, in the middle of that range, from 3.5 to 5, we focused on 4%, getting our dues to about $5.30. It's a $21 increase and $1.75 a month. But that has a gap still in where we are with inflation. So taking a hard look at that and the reality thereof, 6.1% is really more of the real world where we are. That's a $10 increase from the 4.1%. It's a $2.58 increase per month. But that really puts us in a place, I think, which is a better spot for both our operational costs as well as fulfilling the future needs with our reserve study. Here's a picture of that. So if we were to look at the 3-year average, which is the blue line, and compare that to the inflation rate, you can see where we are, right? But there, the yellow line is our actual dues rates. And so where we sit here at 2023, you can see where the end of that gold line is, and getting up to where the inflation rate is a sizable gap. And so last year, I believe we asked for a 4.70 area increase. That was not brought about, but if that's where we would have been, the gap that we really need to fill would be a lot less than we are now. We're playing a little catch up this year, but it's really the thing to do. So in looking at our master plan and how we fund new capital, it really comes out of the reserve fund and how it affects our fully funded balance. Water conservation and the reserve fund fully funded balance are probably the 2 most important things that really kind of came out of the master plan. We have 7 very beautiful golf courses that require groundwater. The new laws that come into effect in the year 2025 restrict how much acreage we can throw water on. And the fact that some of our golf courses are of an age where the irrigation systems need replacement. Those are expensive. And so we're dealing with that, and I think our reserve fund has the water conservation and groundwater on golf taken care of. But it's the other issues that are going to come down the line here in the state of Arizona that kind of leave us out there a little bit. And that is how we deal with potable water and some of the resources that we have that require that. Lawn bowling, our park, outdoor landscaping, and the softball field kind of come to mind. I'm hoping down the road with the billions of dollars generated in tourism, right, that we did benefit on the groundwater side. The Arizona Department of Tourism gave us $104,000 this year for each of the golf courses that we're preparing to take care of as far as groundwater conservation as as a grant and an assistance in reducing turf. So that's a good thing. Down the line, potable water, there's going to be, I think, some benefits coming down the line from the state legislature. Similar case in Las Vegas, Nevada, where they're paying homeowners to basically put in rock lawns and desert landscaping and remove their grass yards. Those are being funded just simply to preserve water in their world. But the other improvements that the master plan called out for, whether it's IT and the modernization of what we do, the advancements of pickleball and how that is growing nationally as well as locally here, and the demands that they're placing on us as far as court conversion and more space needed has to be dealt with. The community center improvements that we talked about, expansion of our administrative facility, maybe over to the library, to a community center, improving the library, modernization thereof, all require funding, as well as the request potentially to get into some kind of casual dining environment here that our owner members are kind of seeking and wanting. Those require funding, new funding, and that's where the reserve study kind of comes in, and that's where the increase in membership dues can also assist in that mechanism. So the range that we talked about initially, from 3.5 to 4.1, after looking at all of the things that we kind of talked about, the gaps in inflation, looking at a 3-year average, a $31 increase is a $2.58 a month increase in our annual dues. It is, my and our staff's determination that a 6.1 increase from 509 to 540 would be the thing to do to get us to a point of balance. We're looking to increase our guest fees to $4 and $6 for adults. I think that's a couple dollar increase. And then our tenant card increase of 6% as well. Our surrounding communities are kind of doing the same thing. If you look at Sun City, 6%, the Grand up to 7%, Sun City Festival 10%, Pebble 7%, and Westbrook Village at 8%. And you can see where their rooftop charges are, Sun City being a unique kind of environment. But if you divide that rooftop cost out, again, we're still back in the bargain statement. When it comes to APF fees, we're anticipating, right now we're sitting at $4,200. We're anticipating raising that to $5,000 for a buy-in for newcomers coming into this environment. It's well worth the buy-in. And I would, Terry, if you want to, can you put that extra slide up there where we talk a little bit about mortgage rates and the APF scenario? This was excluded from your packet. I apologize for that. We put this together yesterday, but just wanted to show a couple of contrasts here. Where we are fiscal year 21-22 compared to now on the graph on the right shows where we are mortgage rate wise. And if you take that gray line and apply it to the graph on the left, you can see what that does to our housing sales. That affects our APFs tremendously, right? The blue line is essentially the average of what we've been doing for the last 10 years, if not longer, right, Pete? The blue line represents about a 1,200 home sale market a year. And the gold line kind of shows last year where we kind of hit a little bit of windfall, right? Up to 1,600. It was big last year. Lots of sales. Yes. That graph just reflects those years on the graph. But the blue line really is going back 10 years, like a 1,200 home average on an annual basis. Yes, ma'am. So that really affects what we're doing as far as, budgeting and that type of thing. So hence a little increase in those fees can help offset that. But we hope that mortgage rates drop, which then would hopefully increase our annual turnover on sales. There you go. Okay. I don't. So they, you go. Go up top. Go get them. This? Mm-hmm. Get them. just got to get some.
Oh, sure, yeah. Oh, he's getting okay? So comparisons, we know that the credit card fees was projected into the previous submission. It's my understanding that, the basis of that was, the surrounding communities are all doing that. It's my understanding in the latest iteration that we're doing, this is being tabled, and the 6.1 that Bill alluded to earlier it's in our most current modeling. One thing that came out of a latest iteration was the concern over the golf rounds. Just for a little background, 333,000 were done in the prior fiscal year 22. We're on pace to be at about 325 or so in the current year. Some of the things that he alluded to earlier regarding frost and rainouts and things like that, restrictions, is causing our year over year to continue to show some deterioration. I just got the information from Pat this morning that the rounds for March of 23 compared to March of 22 were 5% down and almost 2,400 rounds. So I think before we go too far and say 5% is what we need to do, remind ourselves that it was a very unusual year relating to weather and frost.
Let me go back a couple. Thank you. Just a quick touch up on this one. With these community decisions as far as their membership only scenario, right? Everybody that plays golf with there is a member too. And this is just a percentage if people decide to play with a credit card. If they come in, write a check, they use another kind of way to pay for their annual dues, there's no extra fee, but this is just for folks using a credit card. So I just want to make sure that that's there. These folks do that, but they only do it in membership. But golf is not treated that way. It's basically done just like we're doing right now as far as that goes. So I just wanted to say that unlimited cards jump a little bit, $100 from $3,500 to $3,600. Twilight's up a little bit in the public card from $1,500 to $1,575. Drop a little bit on the rental decrease on golf carts to $16 per person per round. That was for $18 currently. We're also looking at a little bit of fee increases at bowling for the league rate, 50 cents, $2 in special events, and then both at our facilities, not only golf, but the sports pavilion as well, increasing pitchers to $1 increase, as well as cans, 50 cents. So looking back, comparing this 5-year fully funded balance impact, basically we're looking at a total increase of 7.2 after 5 years as far as the reserve fund, total balance of 29 million. As far as that goes, fully funded balance at 51.2% compared to the 4.1% originally possessed, taking that $300,000 out of membership, gets us at 48% at a fully funded balance, 51.2% at the 6.1 rate. And if you really want to kind of close that gap, we go to an 8% scenario up to 53. It is being proposed that we take a hard look at 6.1. With that, our annual dues would put us at $540 annually. Again, still comparing us to the top 10, 55 plus communities. I would still consider this a wonderful bargain. That is all I have today, when we can be happily discuss any kind of questions you have.
Does anyone in the committee have questions for Mr. Schwind? David?
Bill, how much revenue do we lose by decreasing the golf cart price?
decreasing golf cart price.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna take it from 18 down to $2. How much revenue do we lose by doing that?
You got a stab on that, Pete?
$48,000?
How much? 48?
So I was a little surprised when I saw this because in the February golf committee meeting, Pat was directly asked that question by one of the committee members about whether our golf cart rates were too high. And he gave a, I hate to characterize it as a somewhat rambling answer, but he talked about how we needed that revenue to cover the cost of fuel for the golf carts and the labor, you know, to maintain the golf carts and everything. And basically at the end, his statement was, people aren't complaining about the price. So what's the rationale for the reduction?
Go ahead.
Terry, could you come up here, please?
Pete, you got that?
Terry, if you would, this is Terry West. And Terry is one of the seniors in the finance department.
I know Pat is very sensitive about price point. I mean, I looked at his comparison of golf rates or the surrounding communities
True.
that he presented in January. And as he puts it, you know, golf's entertainment. And at some point in time, you decide you're not going to pay the fee. I went out and did a little bit more extensive comparison that he did. And, you know, our golf rates compared to many of the courses within a 15-mile radius of here, with the exception of Sun City, we're just dirt cheap compared to those. So again, from an entertainment providing value, we're doing that. So again, I'm a little surprised that we're throwing $50,000 or $48,000 away, and we don't seem like we really need to do that.
We don't, but I think there's, if we can talk a little bit about the scenario of the folks that play golf here, very high majority of folks live here.
Yeah.
And typically have their own carts. And so I think what we want to do is make sure if we're going to raise the fees 5, 3, and 1% as far as, or 5, 3, and $1 as far as the outside play goes, it's kind of getting to the sensitivity point of not chasing away outdoor or outside play. That's a $2 million increase for us as far as a annual dues coming in as far as the outside play goes. And I think right now we're at 18, right? $18 for the cart based on the fees that you pay for a green fee, throw the cart on there. So it's going to be X dollars depending on what time of year you're playing. And I think the sensitivity there was to not chase those folks off. If we're going to increase their green fees, let's kind of keep this down so we kind of bring those people or retain those people's behavior and come back and play here.
Yeah, so when I did my comparison study, I just went to the Golf Now app and, I pulled up the courses within 15 miles, again, with the exception of Sun City, which is just dirt cheap. And I forgot to bring my notes this morning, but the average price, including a cart, at the courses that I looked at, and there were 14 of those, it was either $113 per round or $119 per round. Okay, and we're talking about now going to 66 plus 16, so I think that's 82. So that's something on the order of a $30 price difference. So, we clearly are a good price for people who want to come in. We can get into a discussion, which I won't do today, about really what's our business model for golf, because there's been a lot of discussion about dynamic pricing and whether, when I looked at the Golf Now app, I saw Grand was on there, Sun City was on there, Sun City West was not. So, it doesn't appear to me that, our marketing strategy for trying to bring in outside play, and if we're really worried about decreasing rounds, it doesn't seem like we're taking that step to try and bring the extra players in. That's a separate discussion for a different day.
Right.
One other question, and then I'll stop. When you talked about removing the range ball impact, okay, that was a very first slide. Are you saying they're not going to increase the prices of range balls?
No, we are not.
Okay.
We are, regarding range balls, we do have a discounted pass for
Yeah, I have that.
owner members.
Right.
That remains.
Right.
And then outside play, I believe we're taking that opportunity away from the general public, and they just pay for range balls as they show up.
Okay, so they're going to pay $2 and $4 or $3 and $6?
3.6.
Okay, so that's still an increase in range balls?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Christine?
Kind of build, I'll start by building off of Mr. Miller's points. Bill, was the golf committee involved in making any of these pricing decisions?
They were. We had, thus far, we've had 2 months, 2 meetings with the golf committee talking about where we are as far as that
Okay.
goes.
So did they wait, so they're in agreement with the changes that have been built in here?
Some of them, and some are with us, our staff, myself, and that kind of thing. Do you remember which ones we were deviating from on that one? I think the $16 cart rate was our recommendation to kind
Okay.
of drop that down a little bit, as well as range balls.
I guess it doesn't really have anything to do with us per se, but I would just encourage us to go back and consult with them on some of those points that Mr. Miller brought up of sensitivity, right? You've done a lot of study. I know they have too.
Well, you know, I shows you what my life is like. I watched the last 4 months of the golf committee yesterday evening. And the way I interpreted it was Pat came and said, this is what we want to do in terms of the rates. And
Right.
It started off, well, we want to do $9. That's the discussion. And then, no, we rethought that. We want to do $7. Okay. And now in the presentation, it's $5 for the outside play increase. Okay. There was no discussion that was in public between going from 7 to 5.
That was sort of my, I
Okay.
didn't watch 4 months worth.
So, you
Thanks
know,
for
the way
that.
I interpret what happens is Pat comes in and says, we've done our analysis and here's what we want to do. And I didn't really see any great involvement from the committee on anything other than when the credit card was presented.
Yeah,
And
Okay,
then people
thank you.
really got angry.
I think we need to be careful here because
So-
we really don't want to go into the thought process of the golf
Right.
committee. You know,
I just-
they're people that they're learned people and they understand golf and they're providing a recommendation and either there will be accepted or it won't be accepted.
Exactly.
Okay.
That was my point.
So,
Yeah.
thank you.
Just to
So,
consult back to
yeah, good.
that.
It's a good point. Thank you. All
I had
right.
but I had a couple of other questions.
Okay. I'll let you have one and then I'll pass it to Mr. Bignato and then I'll come back to you, Christine. Okay?
Sounds fine. Going to slide 14, if you could. You cite a 3-year average of inflation number, right, as one of the member dues. And when you actually, that conflicts with the math that you show in the slides previously. Just so you're aware, when we're explaining this, it's more if you compound that average over the period of time.
Mhm.
It's not the last 3 years that have they do not average to 6.1%. It's 4 point something, right? It's on your previous slides.
Okay.
Just to address that a little bit in terms of a talking point, I believe what you're recommending is it catches us up with that historical.
Yes.
If we did a 3-year average, if we had established that floor going back a few years, this is where we would have. Am I correct there, Mr.
Yeah,
Schwinn?
I can't adjust that slide. Can you go back to the grid? Not there.
10, I think. So if you roll all that forward, I think that's the point you're trying to make. Am I correct?
That is correct.
So it's not the 3-year average of inflation. You can just adjust that. And we should all understand this is what, if we had established this floor in 2015 or something, then this is where we would have netted out. So
Yes.
we should adjust that talking point.
Okay.
So there is a very comprehensive explanation of this on the Bureau of Labor Statistics website. And it's very in-depth, and it goes into methodology, and it goes into a month-by-month analysis.
I'm very well aware of that.
Okay.
All right.
And
I'm
so-
saying that the math does not,
Yeah.
it is not a 3-year average, Dick.
Okay.
So we should just be clear to our members and to ourselves what we're actually proposing. I'm not opposed to it. We should just clear that language up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Bignato?
Thank you, Dick. Going back to slide number 2, language is in there, removed range ball increase impact $50,000. So I took it as that there would be no increase in range balls, the cost for range balls. But then, Bill, if I heard you correctly, you said there would be a dollar increase. So I'm kind of confused. So what is going to be done for the range balls?
I believe there is a, can you go back to the, is there a slide that talks about that?
In the budget packet that was sent to the board members, in addition to this presentation, it still shows for the golf fees, it shows range balls for a small bucket to be $3, which is a $1 increase.
That's what I thought.
So,
And I was just trying to, thought we had that on this slideshow.
We can't hear that, so if, Terry, if you could either come up or, because I want everyone to hear what your explanation is, please.
So until we hear further from Terry, if I understand correctly, range balls will increase by $1, from $2 and $4 to $3 and $5, which of course is still a bargain, but that conflicts with what's on slide 2. So let's hear it.
Did I?
Yeah.
So in the first section where it came back to the 6.1, 4.1, and 3.5, that didn't, we took out all the range ball increase. But I believe at the end, I wasn't part of the last day I was out also for on a vacation day, but it could include an increase for the outside range balls. That one I'm guessing. But the first section, the first changes, we took out all the range ball increases.
okay, I'm still struggling.
Wait a
with
minute, David, just a second. Okay.
Well, no, I want to let David go ahead because he's well-versed in this, and then we can come back to my second
Okay, let's
question.
finish this then, and then we'll go on.
Okay, so when we talk about outside, not everybody that lives in Sun City West buys a range ball key. Okay, and so if somebody chooses to go up and spend currency, okay, you can't differentiate between whether they're a resident and whether they're not a resident. So in essence, what you're saying is if you're a cash payer, you're going to have an increase in range ball costs, regardless of where you live. So I would say don't refer to it as outside.
True.
It's cash versus key. So.
Okay, thank you. Christine?
I think Frank was,
Oh,
So I
read
have
through,
one-
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Yeah, so I have one more to go over on slide 18. Okay, so below the golf greens fees, it says $3 and $1 for member guests, $5, $3, and $1 for public. Our rate structure now shows member guests and public paying the exact same rates. And so is this going to be a proposal where we will now have two separate rates because the increases that are being proposed are two separate rates? So I'm kind of confused by that.
Okay.
If you look on the schedule, and I'm sure that you know this, it's the same rate. And so if you're going to add another line item to separate resident guests from the general public who walk in off the street, then that's what I'm taking from this part. So if we could get some clarification on that. And then the bottom line, $2 for members during peak and transition and $1 for summer. I want to point out again that when you increase $2, it ends up being an across-the-board increase. And so the resident standard rate goes up by $2, the Kachina rate goes up by $2, the Coyote rate goes up by $2. Coyote and Kachina card holders end up absorbing far more than they really should. Kachina card has traditionally been a 50% discount from the rack rate, and that's now been eroded for the past 2 years. If this $2 increase goes through, that's actually a 10% increase, roughly, for what Kachina card holders have to pay. And we paid a 16% increase last year. Now we're getting another 10% increase. So I think that needs to be tempered a little bit. I think you're asking too much from people. Okay, I'm done.
Christine, do you have other questions?
Gary, were you also waiting? I'm sorry. Okay, it's not, my question's not on golf, so, okay. Either Bill or maybe even Dick, I'm not sure, slide 16, where you talked about the credit card fees. We've all spent a lot of time thinking about this and talking about the fee absorption versus passing it on. And could you just recap really quickly why we're tabling that for now and what we want to do in the future?
Tabling that?
Yes, you mentioned while presenting on slide 16 that we're tabling the notion of passing on credit card fees and saying we're just going to absorb those fees across the board for everything as a cost of doing business. That's your recommendation. I know we've all had a lot of discussions, gone back and forth. Could you give us a little bit more color or commentary as to why, what was that decision and why?
And again, the reason for some of these meetings is to definitely talk about that. This is a $300,000 decision here. So we have been pressing for a long time, obviously, to improve what we're doing and the efficiencies on how we operate in the world of accepting credit cards, whether it's membership, whether it's golf, or whether bowling, or whatever we're taking in money, right? It's the way of the world. It's kind of the cost of doing business. And so how are we dealing with that? So over the last 5 or 6 years, our credit card fees that the bank collects from us has jumped, right? Close to $600,000. The difference between this year and last year is about a $50,000 increase, right? And how are we really dealing with that? It's really a philosophical question to answer. It's the cost of doing business. And I think in the past, our golf fees, particularly when it comes to the $10 million or so that we generate in revenue from golf, has been incorporated into those fees, right? And we kind of kept that. Yet the vast majority of people playing golf are owner members. And so, you know, we have been discussing back and forth, do we keep the credit card fees into the annual dues that we charge, because the golf people are paying that too. And so it's been kind of tossed around back and forth. Do we just put that into the cost of doing business, or do we add a 3% similar to what other communities are doing regarding membership to do that? There's a way for the members to avoid that, and that is don't pay with a credit card, right? Write a check, do whatever you have to do to avoid that extra $15 charge. Again, that's just something to do. There's been talk going back and forth. If we do it for membership, maybe we should do it for golf. What's good for one, what's good for all. So it's really a kind of a governing board process as to where we're going. And so this presentation today, like I said, when we started, there's a lot of moving parts.
Sure.
Right? We're not done. We'd like to talk about it. But basically, where are we and whatnot? Myself, I personally have a different view. I think we should leave that opportunity there for us to bring in an extra $300,000 on these fees for membership if they're going to continue to pay with a credit card. Mm-hmm. There are other people that see that differently. And so it's just a matter of philosophical soundness as to where your recommendations are to the governing board, and ultimately it lands on that decision.
Understood.
I'd like to add to that, because I think we all know that credit card fees, it's kind of like Amazon saying you get free shipping, you know? Well, kind of, yeah, but it's tit for tat, you know, and we all understand that. I think what we're seeing here in this presentation is a further development of the discernment that the governing board's going through in trying to make an informed decision regarding the dues and how do we compute and what should they be. So we, the Budget and Finance Committee, have been very clear in our recommendation that we think that credit card fees should be applied across the board. Well, the governing board says, hold on, maybe not. Are there other options? And that's what we're seeing today. So to say that credit card fees is being taken off the table is a bit of a misnomer. It really isn't. This is another option that the governing board is looking at, and I think they're very serious in their deliberations. And as Mr. Schwinn said, that it is almost a philosophical approach. You know, we're not
Absolutely.
fooling anybody about free shipping, and we're not fooling anybody about credit card fees. You're going to pay it or you won't.
Exactly.
And you have a choice to do that.
What we've
So-
done in this presentation, what we would do, assuming we went forward, is basically we're acknowledging that there's an increased cost of doing
Right.
business, right? Across the board, that the golf committee had recommended, if I remember correctly, don't put that as a separate line item on the credit card charge. Let's build it into the cost. And we're doing the same thing with our membership dues, as I understand it, which makes sense. I just wanted everyone to understand. It's the
Thank you.
same
Thank you.
thing.
Thank you. Do we have other members? Mr. Bagnat, or Mr. Bosak?
Just on that topic, because you happen to be there, getting a discount always warms people's hearts as opposed to paying a little bit more. What if you gave them a discount for paying their membership dues by cash or check?
Well, if you raise the fees, right? If we pick a percentage, right? 6.1, 4.1, whatever the approved annual fee is, and you pay that, that's essentially, to me, that's your discount.
Well,
if you pay with a credit card, you're going to get 3.5% on top of that.
I'm thinking, how do we stimulate people to do the right thing? If we had a campaign throughout the community to save $300,000 by not putting membership fees on your credit cards, what would it take to get people to do that? Some people will pay it no matter what, and they don't care about the 3%.
Right.
But somewhere we got to educate or be attractive or appeal to people's sense of doing the right thing for the community. And $300,000 is nothing to sneeze at. We got to figure a way to reduce that. The $220,000 in golf with the many, many more transactions, I think, is a tougher nut to crack. But membership, to me, is everybody pays it. Everybody's in the same bucket. We ought to have the same resolution. A couple things back on the range balls. God, I remember when we took range balls from a quarter to 50 cents, and I thought the community was going to rebel. We're putting new machines in the courses, and they have cards, not the keys, and they're individuals. So there won't be a problem in differentiating who's using the card and what the rate ought to be, as I understand it. Two other things that just struck me as you're talking, Bill, about the rounds and the projection that you're proposing. We can't lose sight of the fact that Grandview Back Nine is now closed, and Desert Trails, their second and third highest round courses, are going down this year. And the Grandview in particular is going to really have a negative effect on the rounds. Desert Trails, the most popular short course, same thing. So wherever you took that, I'd be comfortable with, but I'm glad you're moving it in the right direction because I just don't see those things coming back. Second point, I've mentioned it before, I'm sorry to be a dead horse kicker, but losing housing sales costs us rounds of golf. Mm-hmm. We don't have new members, new residents coming into the community, and the 600 that we lost from last year to this, and the projection that we're looking at now, and some of the members on this committee have said it's more than a 1 or 2 or 3 year program where we're looking at flat real estate sales. And as long as the interest rates are high, probably going to be the case. But those two things don't get a lot of conversation, but they are going to have a very negative effect on the rounds of golf next year. The cart fee issue, the only thing that concerns me is I don't think people are going to make a difference in their mind between $16 and $18. However, we don't have enough carts as it is. And many days on the weekends, we're out of carts at the course, and we can't rent a cart to somebody anyway, so they wind up taking their business elsewhere because they have to have a cart to play. So I'm not sure what the resolution ought to be, but I don't think we lose anything by staying at the $18. If anything, 16 in somebody's mind may make it more attractive to come here and then not have a cart. Really disappoints people.
Yeah. And back to Mr. Miller's comment, if I may, the research that you did relative to our competitors and outside play, averaging 100 and over three digits, right?
It was like $113.
Did that include carts?
That included cards.
Okay. Okay. So looking at that, and I think that's the sensitivity that we're trying to kind of play with there is, you know, if we want them to come here. There was an issue with Golf Now a year or so ago that they were charging us a ridiculous amount of money and demanding too much from us that we felt was unfair. So we stopped that program. That's changed. So you'll start seeing a lot more of our openness on that program. So that maybe should help as well. But again, it's really when you start getting close to that 3-digit number of $100 and whatnot, you know, there's value there. And we want to make sure that we stay in the market and not chase anybody away to, I mean, you got a lot of competition around here in the summer, in the winter times and whatnot. There's a lot of golf in the valley. I mean, the how many millions of rounds of golf were played. It's tough. And outside golf it's a $2 million market to us. And we want to make sure we kind of preserve that. And, you know, given the fact that owner members have, you know, the additional time frame to get their rounds in prior to opening these other up to the general public, we want to make sure we have the opportunity to kind of keep our tee sheets full. So we're sensitive to that dollar amount.
A couple of other thoughts. Pat's sensitive at the $90 rate. I mean, he's trying to stay under $90 because he thinks that's a threshold that if we go over, we're going to wind up risking some of that. I just remind everybody that non-resident play is 18% of our total rounds.
Right.
So we're still talking about 82% of the folks that we're trying to pay attention to who live here and gain maximum leverage from them.
Keyword, there's risk, right?
Right.
We don't know.
Right. And if what we do doesn't work, we go back and change it. I mean, it's not going to be the end of the world.
Mr. Hobald?
Excuse me. Thank you. First of all, I'm going to say publicly, thank you for the budget, all the work you've done up to this point, all the work Cliff has done, Terry's done, and others. It's an exercise in perseverance on your parts. I know that. It's a lot of work, and I think you have done a very commendable job, as has been done in the past, in getting the community and the leaders in the best position to make fact-based and near fact-based decisions by getting this information in front of you. You've done a marvelous job. Thank you. My question is one of clarification. I'm still confused on what credit card fees are impacted in the proposed budget. Could you help me by saying, are you assuming that the community will pay the 2.65% fees on all activities, no activities? What line item does that show up in the expenses here? And then is there anything in the membership revenue that would account for us collecting it and then dispensing it in revenue?
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I'm just probably a little behind the curve.
Oh, that's okay.
I want some clarification on that so I understand it better.
What slide number is that? It's kind of late in the program. Can you advance toward the end there, Carl? That one? So I didn't see what slide number that was, but that's toward, it's, if not, is that the end of is that the last slide in the program? Okay. So essentially, when it comes to either the 4.1 to 6.1% that we're kind of highlighting here and showing, all the credit card fees are assumed to be operational costs, right? They're all consumed into the revenues that we generate. We're not asking for any additional fees at this point.
And on the expense side, I
shouldn't
jumped
say that.
ahead of you. I probably cheated. I looked at the proposed budget and the line items. I do very well with the line items.
Okay.
And can you tell me where that is in the expense, and is it assumed that we pay it on all credit card transactions?
That is true.
Membership, golf,
Bowling.
bowling, everything.
Yes, sir.
It's all in the expense.
That is
and
correct.
what row would I look at to find that that's embedded in there?
I can show you after, in the budget packet. In the budget packet, I can show you. The budget packet is based on the first part before we get to the GM recommendations. The GM recommendations end up in these FFBM packs. The first part includes membership, credit card fees still included, that's in the budget packet.
Okay.
And it's in the
My
other
reason
income.
for seeking clarification on that is that I was one of the folks a couple meetings ago who voted for the lower increase in the fees, with the assumption in my mind that we would isolate those charges and give the owners an option to incur that cost or not incur it. And therefore, it wouldn't be a revenue need. If we're going to absorb all those costs in the budget, then my position changes, and I would say we need to have higher revenue from membership in order to pay our bills. So I just want to make very clear that when I have to cast a vote of whatever sorts, non-binding as this commission or as this committee is, I want to make sure I'm doing it on a good understanding of the facts. So thank you.
Mr. Bagnato?
Before I get into my next question, congrats to Gary Bosak for making a hole-in-one. Good job.
That's new business.
Going back to the credit card fees, and it's something it's just very important to me that I think we do the right thing for the community. There was a time when the merchant banks who carried the credit card business, they charged very modest fees that people could live with. But over time, those fees have increased, and I'm sure that a lot of those fees that they charge is to make sure that they can cover the cash back or airline miles or KOA credits or whatever it is that people are getting from using their credit cards. That fee was probably very small for us, or certainly a lot less than it is now, even 5 years ago. Now that fee amounts to about $570,000, which is, I believe, is the estimate for the new budget year. We know that that fee has been paid through some component of golf rates, some component of annual dues, some component of food and beverage. In other words, every piece of revenue that comes into the community in some way covers that cost. By removing that expense from that side of the equation, then some component of resident dues could possibly be decreased. It might be as much as $10. It doesn't sound like a lot of money, but again, if that were removed, the dues increase could be tempered, maybe even by half of what that amount of money might be. And that was really the whole point that I raised, that this expense has gotten to be so large that it isn't right to ask the residents who rarely or maybe even never use a credit card to continue subsidizing those who do. The expense needs to be put into the pockets of the people who use the credit cards because they are the ones that are causing this expense. That's what I have to say about credit cards.
Okay, Ms. Redmond?
Okay, my question is going back to this summary of revenue over expenses. When I look at membership fees that have changed now, they've increased about $467,000 from the last budget that was presented. What percentage increase are you using to come up with that number? Are you using the 6.1%? Did you, there was definitely a change.
Yes,
From the 4.1. Okay.
it is the 6.1.
It is the 6.1. And that is based on primarily the 3-year average of the CPI.
Correct.
Okay. It does not include credit card fees. I think we've established that with all these, the various questions. I just needed, that point for clarification in terms of what we're looking at. And in terms of credit card fees, sometimes it's an incentive to charge, if someone's going to use a credit card, maybe they should pay that additional cost. But, thank you.
Ms. Brown?
When I look at the budget that's attached with all the detail and all the numbers, on page 2, or page 3, I'm sorry, it states the assumption that the proposed change is going to $530, and yet you keep talking about $540 in your first part of the presentation.
Right.
It also talks about golf rounds being $326.5, but now they're going to $315. So in other words, this doesn't line up with those other assumptions. Is that correct?
That is correct. And that was simply because, again, a lot of moving parts, and we have the deadline that we have to get that presented to you all for publication and posting, and, you know, the public meetings and printing in the newspaper as we move through this budget process. So it really was more of a timeline issue for us than anything, because as we continue to develop this budget moving forward, things move. And that was, unfortunately, that's kind of one of the downfalls of that.
Okay, so I just want to point out, we're not really comparing apples and oranges. We're always comparing apples and golf balls.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you, Bill, and I understand the deadline.
Bill, we're going to draw this part of the discussion to a close. Now, we're going to continue to discuss this.
Fine.
But in the interest of time, we need to move forward to another agenda item. And then I think we're going to come back and discuss this. So if you could kind of bear with us on this. I think I would like to tell you, and I want to commend you and Cliff and Terry and Pete and the entire finance staff. You guys have done a marvelous job of putting this together. We're not trying to catch you on anything here. We just need clarity.
Right.
You made some very bold assumptions, but they're the same assumptions that have been asked by governing board members to you to try to get clarification on. To me, this is part of the journey and the discernment that we're going through and playing this what-if scenario and to see where the pieces fit together and to see what's the best fit for our homeowners. Because we're painfully aware that this is not our money, this is the homeowner's money, and our responsibility is to be stewards of that money. So again, I commend you and your staff for an excellent job on a short time frame. We might tear it apart, but on the same token, you guys have done a great job, and I want to thank you for that.
Well, thank you. And again, I want to apologize a little bit. If we do our own presentations, right, it's much more fluid if I'm doing a presentation that I created, right? This is Cliff's presentation. So,
Throw him under the bus, that's
no,
okay.
not throwing him under the
We
bus.
understand.
He's just not here to defend. So to ask questions for us to react to what ifs here is tough.
Well, Bill,
Because, you know, A, put a computer in front of us, B, we can refer to notes, B, and C, it's complicated. There's a lot of moving parts here, right? And so, A, I apologize for that. Thank you for the compliments. This is not an easy task, but lastly, I hope you do rip it apart, because that's where we're ultimately going to get to a point where everyone's going to agree on this, get it in front of the governing board, and we'll move forward. But I think we're in a pretty good spot.
thank you. It's, part of this is reducing the decisions down to philosophical decisions too. So thank you very much. If you would kind of stand by, because we have some capital issues that we want to deal with.
Okay.
And then we want to come back, and on the agenda, we have a discussion about this budget.
All
okay?
good.
Thank you. Oh, wait, I should ask, before you step down, is anyone in the audience have a question for Mr. Schwinn? We do have one. If you would identify yourself, sign in, and give us your rec card number, please.
Bill Weaver, 124087. This is just regarding the golf. If I can find where I put it. And maybe it's more of a comment than a question. If we looked at how round utilization was pre-COVID and you saw the decline. Then we went through COVID, and it was the only outdoor activity we could do. Now we're post-COVID, and I would suggest that our rounds will start to recede back to where they were going back in the pre-COVID era, that we will start to see a decline in golf usage. That may not necessarily be a bad thing. There's another thing, that supply and demand. If you raise rates, you'll also help to decrease rounds, but it'll also reduce the amount of maintenance. And I am not one who will give accolades to our golf courses. I don't think they're much better than municipal courses back in the Midwest. We play on dirt in the rough in the winter. We play on messed up Bermudas often in the summer. The greens are dotted with pitch marks. Now, perhaps we could get a pride group similar to Fixes Up the Landscaping and fix up greens and stuff along the way and make them better. But the greens do bounce. And so the whole thing of golf, I mean, this probably goes back to the golf committee, but I hope they would get a little bit directly involved with some of that aspect and do some super recommendations back to Pat on some of these things.
Thank you for your comments. We're going to move on to item 3.03. It's the new capital and the R&R items that we have here. I'd like to open this discussion by saying that we've seen all of this before. We've probably already have ideas on what we want to do with it. I think this is our last chance to get to comment on it. What I would like to do is to identify the exceptions, and then as a matter of policy, we will approve in whole that particular group of projects. So if you understand what I mean, we'll look at the very first one is Beardsley for $45,000, and then the next one, and I think that color is green. If you're colorblind, you don't know. Lizard Acres.
Is this in our packet?
Yes, it is.
It's the last.
Thank you, I'm
couple of
sorry.
pages.
Yes, I got it.
Yeah, yeah. So, and we'll do that for 1, 2, 3, 4 sections. So I'll open the floor. Does anyone have any, and let's start with the new, and that's categorized in the first column, and it says new as opposed to R&R. Okay? Is there anything in there that we wish to discuss or pull out? Ms. Brown?
Yeah, I was just wondering why we are adding a pickup truck at R.H. Johnson.
We retired a pickup truck as of this year.
So wouldn't that show as replacement? Wouldn't that be replacement? But that's been on here since October as new, and it's not showing us a repair and replacement.
Carl, as I recall, this was a new
Oh,
item.
no, I apologize. We
Yeah.
did retire a truck. That truck is a different scenario. That's the truck that was replaced with a inventory truck that Russ and I managed. This is a new truck needed for facility support. It is new.
But we've not had one before? I mean, we've not had one at R.H. Johnson before?
Yes, there is a current truck at R.H. Johnson.
So you're adding another one?
That is correct.
Okay, just wondered what the reasoning was.
Staff support, driving around the community, trailer use, audio video technician driving, currently turns in a monthly report for gas expenses using his own vehicle, 2 supervisors as opposed to 1 supervisor in the field now, so all the trucks have been redistributed.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Do we have a motion to, okay, Mr. Brignano?
This is more of an overall comment on some of the new items rather than any individual one, other than Lizard Acres. I've heard plenty of people complain about the sound system at Lizard Acres, and so that probably needs to go through. As far as the rest of the items in the new category, we're all, I'm going to use the word loosely, nervous about what we're going to end up with this year as far as APFs. We're planning to have less, but we could have even less than that. And I think the most conservative approach, we certainly lived without the shade structure and the storage roof area at Desert Trails. It may be a want, but it may not necessarily be a need. Same thing with the shade structure at the Arts and Crafts Courtyard in Beardsley. At this point, I think they need to either be removed completely because they're wants and not needs, or at least deferred until some point in the future. My feeling is the same about the pickleball lighting, but we'll come down to that. So I think the new items really need to take a hard look at them and say, you know, maybe this is just not the right time to spend this money.
Other comments? I think we need to make a decision. Yes,
Just a quick one. We brought this up, I think, 2 meetings ago. The new capital outlay should really have some kind of, optimally, there should be some kind of tie to our master plan. There's very little in here. The master plan for our community should be funded by new capital expenditures. These are really small overall. So just a general purpose comment. Do any of these, in your view, do any of these tie to the master plan?
These tied to yearly discussions of either improvements or new capital ideas. None of these on this list have anything to do with what I understand is coming from master planning.
Thank you. One other point, I just want to point out that I'm not just a client of the Lizard Acres, many of us may be, but I'm a musician in the community, so I would benefit from the sound system. I just want us to take a look. It's relatively minor, but there is a sound system already in place. Just please factor that in mind, and I think we should take a look at all of our new capital, but we can take a look at that. I'm sure there's an answer as to why it's additional as opposed to a replacement. Thank you.
okay, I think we should go. I think we should go ahead and let's identify. And I'm going to have a consensus of the committee. If anyone has an item they wish to pull out of here, otherwise I plan to make a motion to pass this in with a blanket approval for this particular part.
Is this in total, Dick? I'm sorry.
No, this is only for new. This is only for the 1, 2, 3, 5, 6 items.
Frank wanted the shades taken out.
Pardon?
Frank wanted the shades taken out.
Well, if Frank, if you want that, you should tell us. What I'm asking is there anything on this list that you want to exclude?
The entire list.
No, only on the new list, okay? And if there is, we'll identify that, and then we'll take a committee consensus on it.
So my feeling is the first 5 items should be removed. And the only thing that should remain is Lizard Acres sound system, only because I've been told that the one that's there is terrible. So the first 5 items should be removed.
Okay, does anyone else have any items they wish to identify? Okay, if not, let's start with it. Carl?
I'd like to get an opportunity to at least explain again what these projects are. So Arts and Craft Courtyard, shade structure and concrete. Please remember there's a courtyard at the back of the Arts and Crafts building. We had a tree go down, so it is just an open dirt square right now. And instead of taking so many years to grow a new tree in there, they asked to have shade structure and the concrete improved. Moving on to the Desert Trails Pro Shop storage area roof structure. This is a request from golf operations to create a covered area so that product and garage space can be better utilized, and a roof going over that. And Desert Trails Pro Shop patio structure is a copy project of a 2021 fiscal year project where Deer Valley had the patio expanded with pavers and a shade structure. And again, that came from Golf Ops. The pickup truck is, as I'd explained, for staff needs, social hall ceiling lighting renovation and design engineering. We will not be able to perform any upgrades to lighting or improvements to that room if that $25,000 architectural and design fee is taken away. And that will just be held on pause. And then I'm not hearing an issue with the sound system at the Lizard Acres.
Does anyone have any questions for Carl? If not, I'd like to go ahead and take a voice vote. Let's start with you, Mr. Bosak. Do you support removing these 5 items, or do you want them left in the budget? If you want to remove them, you will vote yes, and if you do not, you will vote no.
No.
Okay, wait a minute.
No.
Wait.
No.
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 Yes.
No.
Okay, the consensus is 6 to 1, 5 to 6 to 1, and it will be, we will move this forward and total all 6 items. We will recommend approval. The next, what color is this? Blue. Light blue. Okay. The next one are the in the blue, and these are R&R items. So these are repair and replacement. We have seen these before. I'm just going to jump right to the one that I know everybody's looking at. The pickleball lights are in that. So I'm going to open this up. Is there anything in this group of R&R items in the blue highlight that we want to exclude? Ms. Redmond?
I'm looking at the pool deck resurface at R.H. Johnson. That's fairly new. I do use the pool, and I don't see what we're going to gain by putting or redoing it.
Carl, would you like to comment on that?
So I'd just ask you to reevaluate when you use the pool next time and take a look. We are at the approximate 7-year mark, and it's very discolored from all the different oils and stains and high traffic as our busiest pool. Facilities maintenance, and even at some point, we've had vendors come. The cool deck is flaking off considerably in a lot of areas. Now, you might not be noticing that because we've been staying ahead of that and actually making the repairs, but it's not same for same product going down. It's kind of our Band-Aids until we introduce this project. And the benefits to our community from the rubber decking is at Kuntz. The science behind that is the opportunity for somebody to lessen a chance of breakage if they fall on the softer surface. That's a benefit. It's got the highest slip resistance, but ultimately we're just battling the cool deck flaking and the acrylic surface flaking, and cannot overcome the discoloration that's in those areas.
Okay, and then one other item I had a question on, and that is at Beardsley, the cardio equipment, are you replacing equipment or adding?
No, we are 100% replacing cardio equipment. So our cardio gets replaced once every 5 years per rec center. So in a couple weeks, I'll be replacing the R.H. Johnson Fitness Center. Next year is Beardsley. The following year, I'm just going to throw it out, there's probably Palm Ridge. The next year's Kuntz, and then in the 5th year, we always have a pause where no rec center gets changed, and then the rotation happens again.
My question, why? I mean, the useful life, they're no longer serviceable, Is it new technology that is coming into play that we are trying to improve?
So 5 years, and obviously over the $5,000 mark creates a capital expense as opposed to an operating expense. The cost of leasing equipment and having relevant new equipment all the time is not beneficial financially. And the equipment does get used heavily and does have a lot of maintenance issues. And the warranties run out for those maintenance opportunity from the vendors after approximately 2 years. And the expense and costs and materials available after 2 years is very difficult for facilities maintenance to stay ahead of. So we have found it best to date that the replacement schedule for 5 years is best for the rec centers.
Are they leased?
No, they are not leased. They are purchased, and then the old units are sold back to the vendors as in some form of credit. And they don't hold a lot of value.
Great, thank you.
Are you satisfied with that decision?
Well,
We'll just, does anyone else have anything they want to identify? Mr. Hovald?
Yeah, thank you. To the pickleball lights, I'm sorry, Carl, I just can't retain all the information that's been given months ago on it. Can you refresh my memory on two aspects to that? First of all, what were the savings or the internal rate of return, however we've calculated it? What are we getting back for that? That's the first question with the LED lighting. And then the second question is, does this project provide more flexibility to only using the lights that need to be used at night as opposed to an all or nothing situation on those lights? Is that clear enough in the questions that you can straighten me out? Thank you.
So the history on this project is simply energy conservation, going around the rec centers and replacing our old lighting infrastructure with new modern energy-saving fixtures. In this particular case, the pickleball is not a convenient conversion to just a fixture head. The fixture head does create a 40% energy conservation to our utility bills, but the infrastructure that's needed to make that happen, as I showed in a slide presentation previously, the costs don't break even until 30 years. So I'm not beholden to this. This is a program we're just carrying through from rec center to rec center. I will say that after doing more homework, the cost here is $309,000. I don't have any financial facts for anybody to reduce that. So we're not beholden to this project based on your decisions and the governing board's decision on this. But I have done enough work with the vendors lately that I'm actually in touch with the original lighting manufacturer, and they might have a solution that they can work with the arms and poles that are there and just support a light fixture. But I'm not farther enough along, and I felt like there was probably enough discussion that this was going to get killed for this season that I will just continue doing my homework and bring it back next year. So,
what about the second part of that question?
Operationally, I think we've made improvements. We have our failure moments due to shortage of staffing, or we've had some time clock issues, cooperation with club use. So managing lighting is not as easy as it sounds. We are doing our best. So we will set the light time clocks for the best operational hours. But with that being an area that's not always fully monitored, it's hard to, you're not going to have the pool monitor come out and be the light police. So
I hope not.
Okay.
And thank you for your candid response.
Other questions? Okay, so let's move forward on this, and let's identify all, if any, items that we would like to take exception with, and or do we want to recommend approval of in a blanket approval on all of the R&R items highlighted in blue. Okay? So who would like to start? Would you, actually, Ms. Red, would you start, since you identified items that after the explanation, you still want to pull them out?
Okay, well, two items. One would be the pickleball light fixtures. I think those should be pulled out. The second one is the pool deck resurface at R.H. Johnson. I just think that where the economy is right now, and these are more wants than needed.
And you're not
And that's
concerned
my-
about the cardio equipment?
At this point, no,
Okay.
for safety reasons.
Okay. Does anyone else have anything? I'm wondering if we shouldn't vote on these individually instead of packaging them. So let's, so we're going to vote on this, and a yes vote will be that we pull that particular item out, and a no vote is that we will leave it in. Okay? This is the same conditions we did last. Okay, now we're going to start with you, Christine. And we're going to start with the pickleball lighting.
We should, yes,
We should pull it out.
yes.
Okay? Mr.
Just
Donato?
we're just talking pickleball.
Just this, we're going to do the,
Because you said one at a time. I thought we were going to do like
we only have
20 of
two.
them.
We have
Okay.
pickleball lighting and we have pool deck, and they may come, may be different. Okay, Mr. Bognato?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Hubald?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, because it sounds to me like you're looking at an alternative anyway, Carl.
So the decision is unanimously, we will remove the pickleball lighting. Okay, now let's go to the deck, and then we'll vote on that, or we'll recommend on that one as well, and then we'll come back and do the blanket approval. Okay, so now this one is for the pool deck resurfacing. That vote yes if you want to pull it out, and no if you do not. Okay, we'll start with you, Mr. Bosak.
No?
No.
Yes.
No.
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 Okay, it's 6-1.
Carl? Being exercise averse, I missed your point on the value of the cardio equipment. There's no resale value to those things whatsoever, and you don't get a trade-in?
When we go out to bid, each vendor gives their own valuation of what the useful value of the is, and I believe like a treadmill might be a couple $100.
Okay.
That's the average history that I'm seeing.
So let's summarize the items on the R&R on the blue list. The only thing we're pulling out is pickleball. We will take exception to that. The balance of the other items in the blue of R&R, we're recommending blanket approval on. Okay? Covers that. Covers
Oh,
that.
that's green.
Okay. Now we're going to move down to R&R in the green section. Is that a different color?
What is the black section part of blue?
That's just a, oh no, that's not a header, is it? I'm sorry. I thought that was a,
Oh, that has been removed and is in the current
Because it's being
fiscal
done now.
year. Yes, that's correct.
okay, thank you. All right, we're dealing now with the R&R and the green section. It's all on the first page. Is there anything in there that we'd like to take exception with? Okay, if not, we're going to take a roll call vote here on, or roll call consensus on blanket approval on all of this. Christine? yes, a yes will move it forward. Okay,
With
everything in blanket. Everything in the green section,
oh,
everything in the green section, we're only talking about the green
I
section.
need more coffee. Yes.
Okay?
Wait, repeat again.
Everything in the green section, a yes vote, we're going to recommend that it moves forward. It's a little different because we didn't take any exception on this.
Gotcha. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
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 Unanimous? The last. Oh, these are allowances, so we don't have to do anything with those.
Unless somebody doesn't agree with it.
All right, the next thing we have are, and what color is that?
Orange.
Orange. The next thing we have is the allowances, and I think that all we'll do here is we'll just ask, Carl, would you give us an explanation on this, please?
Sure, allowances are more of a pool of 400,000, I believe, is the total here, for safety and structural unknown needs, for well and pump replacement in case one goes out randomly, unexpected facility improvements, so mid-year opportunities that somebody presents an idea to the governing board and it gets traction. We already have an allotment, if you will. Same with equipment for unknown needs, information technology, energy conservation. So if I have an opportunity to make an improvement somewhere, and then the unknown ADA compliance upgrades that you never know if we've missed something, or if a member with a new need comes into a rec center and we have to make an adjustment, we have funds for that.
Do we have any discussion on this? Mr. Bignato?
Looking at the allowances, when well pump replacement, was speaking of a well pump for the golf courses, correct?
One more time, please.
So regarding a well pump replacement, that would be for a replacement of a well pump on one of the golf courses, is that correct?
That's correct.
And I seem to recall that the 95,000 has been a number that's been pretty consistent over the years. Do we have enough money with $95,000?
The year that I arrived, fiscal year 20, there was a $95,000 one at Desert Trails, I believe. Then we went about a year with nothing. And then this last 2 years, it's been in the 50 to 80 grand range.
That would be to get a new pump. So we're more than
And then
adequately
usually
covered.
it's plural. Many times it's 15 or 20, 25, but they aggregate to, the 95 has never been capped. That's just good, but we're usually very close to that.
Okay, good. I was more curious than anything else.
Have any other discussion? I'm not sure if we even need, probably do need to take a consensus vote on this, so let's start. Christine? Vote yes if we want to recommend it. Thank you.
Yes.
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 Okay, the record will show it was unanimous as well. Okay. All right, thank you, Carl. We appreciate it. Thank you for your patience and your always very thorough explanation for us, your tutorial. We're going to move back now, or actually want to move forward to item 3.04, and that's a discussion on the budget and planning process. And I'm going to open this up with kind of a summarization of where we are. We, the Budget and Finance Committee, have already submitted recommendations to the governing board regarding 4 items, one of which was validation of our original position to support credit card fees across the board. One was the exact credit card fee that we wanted to apply that across the board. One was the change of the target for the number of APFs to 1,014, and if you recall, that was a negotiated vote. And as Mr. Hobald says, you know you got the right number when nobody likes it, you know, so. And then the final was the recommendation for an APF to go to $4,700, okay? So we are now facing a discussion where the governing board is looking at alternatives. What else can we do? One of the things that I believe that is under discussion is the philosophical discussion of, do we really want to charge a credit card fee? And I can't answer that question. You know, we're charging a credit card fee, whether we admit it or we don't admit it. I mean, because it's either it's paid by the homeowner or it's paid by, and I'm not going to use the word masking, but it's paid by incorporating the fee into our the charges that we would generate revenue. So we need to talk about that. We need to talk about the index. Mm-hmm. That is a very interesting point. I'm not going to say either way, but one of the issues with the index is a quantifiable representation or an indicator of the state of our economy at any given time. And it is, there is methodology behind it. They're very thorough. I'm sure that it has biases, but on the same token, what are our options? But the CPI is an index. We know we can't go over 15%. And it appears that 3% is probably the floor, that it probably won't go below that, but that's just my opinion. So we need to talk about that. We need to talk about the index. We need to talk about APFs. We need to talk about our projection of rounds of golf. Because there is money, and I hate to say this because anytime they tell you it's not about the money, it's about the money that we're dealing with right now. Mm-hmm. Especially in this committee. And that when we knock off 10,000 rounds of golf, you multiply that times $31.19, because that's what the revenue is generated from, and that's in excess of $300,000. So I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to open the discussion. We may or may not have a recommendation coming out of our committee. We may just sit here and talk about this, but if we have a recommendation, I will certainly carry it forward to the governing board. Okay, so I'm going to open the floor up for whoever wishes to begin the discussion. Ms. Redmond?
Yeah, I'd like to talk about the indexes. The CPI, as you mentioned, it's quantitative. I can't pronounce the word. It's a number that can be quantified. It's a number that is basically established by outside governmental sources. So when we start looking at membership fees, it has meaning. If the CPI is increased by 6%, I think to our members, they can understand that expenses to run this facility are basically increased by about 6%, and we do have some outliers here where the percentage is even higher than that. But it's a number that will help or bring the facility close to covering its expenses. To go lower than that, you know, we've talked about the pristine facility and how nice it is. But what we haven't talked about is if we're not able to maintain the facility as it is, there goes our property values. People will not come. They will not want to be, buy in to this particular community if it's not kept up to par. And by not raising the fees, the membership fees, I truly believe that we have to, in order to keep up with inflation, so that we can cover our costs and also be able to fund the reserve. I think that's critical. Regarding the credit card, fees, if you want to add, it should be an add-on, not be considered as part of the 6.1%. That should be an add-on. The 6.1% that's in this budget that we received today is purely CPI, and that's important. If we're gonna send out, the members are gonna receive a bill, for example, their billing with the increase. It gives management the opportunity to say, this is why, and we're attaching it to a quantifiable mark. That's what, I think I'm done.
Thank you. Ms. Novello?
Partially echoing what Susan just said, but I really feel like I need to hammer on this. Apologies. 6% is not the average CPI for the past 3 years. It is, if we had established a floor 10 years ago and rolled it forward, that cumulative effect would be the 6%. But nonetheless, I just want to make sure that we're all clear. The 3-year average of the CPI is less than that. But nonetheless, that's sort of, not apples and oranges, but the bigger point is the first one that you made, Susan, or I think it was among the first ones, this is a beautiful community and we want to preserve that. Bill did a great job of presenting somebody else's presentation. One of the slides he didn't get a chance to present because myself included, we were all hammering him with questions, is it's number 22 in our packs. If you compare our per person individual rates to the rest of the top 10, it's dramatic. What an amazing value we get. Thanks, Terry, for pulling it up. I was just so when Cliff presented this at the governing board a couple of weeks ago, this one took my breath away in a good way, right? It's all the way at the very end, Terry, number 22. This one. I mean, all of us, and I presume that we'll be presenting this to all of our owner members, right? I'm just saying, for all of my hammering on the question of, hey, the calculation of that index for this year, that includes some factor of, hey, we need to do some, if we acknowledge, right, we have to do a little catch up. And by the way, I agree with it. And I also agree with the idea of having a quantifiable index that we can all look at and track and budget toward, rather than it being, taking months and months of discussion. So I'm in favor of all of that. I just wanted to make sure that we understood where it came from. So I like the idea of establishing the floor. I like the idea of coming up with a quantifiable number. That's the floor. Just like the 15% is a ceiling. It doesn't mean that's that it has to be that low, but going forward, that would be the budget. I like that idea. I also like the idea, I don't know whether this is new business or not, but we have two big philosophical, or I don't know if they're philosophical. We're making a couple of really big assumptions around absorbing our credit card fees, for example, and the index itself, the creation of this floor. I hope that the Budget and Finance Committee next year really spends a lot of time analyzing and reviewing. Do we need to tweak those assumptions going into the next budget cycle? Preserving enough time for that. So again, hopeful that Dick will remain in that position, but whomever, perhaps that would be a special study or something that we look at over time.
Thank you, Christine. Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Dick. Going back to this slide here, my sister-in-law lives in Laguna Woods. I called her over the weekend and said, so tell me what you get. And the answer is not much more than we get here. Okay, they pay to play golf. I mean, I looked at that and I thought, oh, well, green fees have to be included with that. No. Okay, they have a few other amenities. I mean, they have horseback riding. They actually own some sailboats that you can rent and go do whatever. But the reality is most of that's probably driven by property taxes and other kind of things for the facilities that they own. So, looking at that as the extreme, they really don't get much more than we do. I like the idea of having our fee or dues increases or our dues tied to an index. The question I would ask is the CPI the right index? I mean, I look at the personal consumption expenditures index, which is what the Fed uses. And, you know, what caught my eye was, says for CPI, medical care expenditures include only those directly purchased by consumers, whereas the PCE index includes those medical costs paid for on behalf of consumers, e.g. through employer-provided health insurance plans. So, you know, when you look at these things, neither one of those, either CPI or PCE, really truly fits what we spend money on here. So, you know, whether there's a perfect one, I don't know, but I think Pete or other people could, in fact, give us some guidance, give us some insight as to, is there really one that's better than the other, or have you already made that decision and that's why you're saying CPI? And then going back to, well, I'll just stop right there for now. But I do like the idea of tying it to a benchmark, because otherwise you're just sticking your thumb up in the wind and trying to figure out, well, what are you going to do? Okay. And so, Pete, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, thank you. Good insight. Don't want to necessarily be a follower, but in our analysis, the associations that have implemented this almost universally have been applying CPI. The state, for our minimum wage, uses that CPI. We have, 200 and plus employees who are governed by that. So a big chunk of our costs are labor, so it'd be nice to have the CPI be in sync with that. So I would argue that it generally speaking is the one we would, and it's also the most visible, to be blunt. And anyway, I'll leave it at that. So.
Thank you. Mr. Bosak?
Whatever we wind up using has to be easily understood by the majority of people, because it will determine whether they buy into this logic or not. As far as your work on what you've done already, I applaud you. I know it's not easy to do this. I just remind you one more time, we got a silent majority in this community that agrees with most of what's been said, and you got a vocal minority that overwhelmed the board last year and caused the reduction in the annual increase in the dues. But the last 3 years, we've averaged 2% increase in our dues over the last 3 years. So we are catching up. And again, you've made some bold moves, and I applaud them. The APF, it concerns me getting that high, but I don't think anybody is not going to buy a house because it's $5,000 versus $4,700. So I don't think that's a heartburn at all. Credit card fees, I think what you've done is kind of trade that off, and I think we're going to wind up looking at that again in the future. If it's not now, then it's going to be later, because it's too big an expense not to, and the winds blowing in other communities are kind of going in that direction. So maybe now is not the time to do that, but at some point we're going to wind up having to revisit it. Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Vignato?
David kind of beat me to the punch with his comments about the CPI. I'm a consumer. The CPI affects me personally, and everyone else on the committee and everyone in this room, the CPI affects them. We buy steaks, we buy food, we go out to dinner. We do the things that consumers do. Mr. Finelli gave us a great synopsis of why they go with the CPI, but again, I question, is there another index that is more in tune with business inflation, the expenses that a business has to incur? I don't think our business is buying steaks unless they're going to be steaks that are going to be used in the golf course to direct carts. So if you catch my drift, we need, I think personally, we need to use an index more indicative of what businesses spend. That index might actually even be higher than the CPI, but we want to make sure we get the right numbers. As far as the credit card goes, my position on that has been clear up to this point and hasn't changed.
Ms. Brown?
Thank you. Just a few comments. I do agree with Frank on that. When we look at CPI, it's just not necessarily what we as individuals may be spending, but because it's the association is a business, and it's what the business spends. I would personally like to see next year if B&F could take a look at setting an index through some learned discussion of what that should be, and then going ahead and having that built into a policy. I think it would also be good to have a policy to do much of what we're doing this year as far as setting how much will go into the fully funded balance, into the reserve fund each year. I would support both of those. Credit card fees, I've kind of vacillated on, and I think maybe we do need to do more study on that. That's kind of been reactionary thing that we've talked about this year. Sounds good most of the time. Other times I can be persuaded in other ways. But with the APFs, I agree with Gary. I don't think we're going to stop anybody from buying here if we go to 5,000. And golf rounds, it's a crapshoot every year. So thank you.
Mr. Hobart.
Thank you. I guess I have a minority opinion here, but I guess that's what discussion is all about. So I'm going to start with a preamble. Listening to the governing board meeting of last week, our general manager made a statement that I'm about to validate with some numbers. He pointed out that over the last several years, we have, as a community, not raised our membership fees as much as our costs have gone up, our expenses have gone up, and we have found alternative sources of revenue to cover our budget, most of those being user fees. So I think what's happening now, and this discussion is all coming about, is a result of our strategies over the last couple of years, and we see that reflected in the fully funded balance and some other things. So without further ado, I'll point out that our compounded annual growth rate of membership for the last 5 years, fiscal 19 to fiscal 23, has gone up 2.5%. All other revenue for a 3-year period, because I excluded the pandemic years in there, have gone up by 9.5%. So we've been riding the horse of more user fees at the expense of membership fees, and I think that we're feeling the pressure and the need for more revenue from membership fees. Our expenses, meanwhile, in the 5-year period of fiscal 19 to fiscal 23 have gone up 4.4%. I'd posit that if you're looking for an index, you might want to consider, if you're going to look backward, which is what an index does, you might want to look at one real close at home. What have our expenses done? I'm very uncomfortable with a couple aspects of the index. The CPI is a very poor form of an index to use. There are wages indexes out there put out by the Department of Labor, and of course 2/3 of our expenses are labor. So there are better things. On the other hand, as Mr. Finelli points out, the CPI is widely published, and there is the advantage of using it, and it's philosophical. There's no right way to look back at costs and indexes and say that's what we're going to charge our members. I'm much more comfortable with using our budgeting of what we expect our expenses to be, and we try to cover it. And I don't think we have been covering it, and it's created some tension and friction in the discussion, and the use of an index solves some of that. I understand. That's the benefit. The negative to it is it's very poor choice compared to what we really think our costs are going to be. And I think our budgeting, the budgeting that has been done here in the entire time that I've been a part of the community has been very good. It's been beyond very good in the last 5 years. It's excellent. We do a very, very good job as a community of budgeting our expense. We know what they're going to be. We don't have the political resolve to deal with it honestly and openly in a public forum. The costs are what they are. It is what it is, and we have an obligation to cover it. And if we want to hide behind an index to do that because it minimizes the friction in the discussion, that's the reason. That would be the only rationale I would support an index. The only reason. But I do see the benefit of reducing friction in a community, especially for the management that has to endure this over and over and over. So that's my say about membership fees and indexing. There are better ones, but if you're going to use one, the CPI is out there, but recognize what you're doing. The idea of a floor on future increases without tying them directly to our expenses scares the heck out of me. You give, as Milton Friedman said famously, you give a politician $1, they will spend it and a nickel more. I don't like the idea of a floor. There's always going to be a morning after. Right now, it fits our purposes because the CPI is high, and we all know that. We feel the effects of inflation. It makes it a real nice, convenient way to do things as opposed to facing up to our responsibilities. How is the conversation going to play out 4 years from now, 5 years from now, if the CPI comes in at 2.2%? Now we're going to tell the people in the community that we have a floor of 3 and CPI is 2 or 2.2. I don't think I want to participate in that conversation. I think that's going to be a tough sell. So I would caution people about a floor. It's just a caution. Just because I feel this way doesn't mean that I would not go along with a majority, because I think one of the things that groups do is that groups tend to make better decisions than any one individual on the group, and I think we all have to recognize that and be a little humble in evaluating our own opinions. Okay, enough said about indexing, enough said about membership fees not keeping up. I personally voted several weeks ago in our meeting to go with a lower recommended membership fee increase because I was counting on us finding a way to segregate the credit card fees. If we're not going to segregate credit card fees, then I am fully supporting increasing the membership fees to truly cover all of our costs and not mince words about it. So if the credit card fees are not included in the proposed budget and the future conversations, I would ask that we take a revote on our positions, because I would certainly change my vote on that. The community needs funds, and you can't get away from that. And I'm sorry, but I got to say it what I think. Relative to the APF fees, yeah, mock snicks. Yeah, it's somebody else's money, and that's a real easy one to go along with. And I don't think it would really, in a normal real estate market, be a deterrent. Golf rounds, I'll say this, I think we need to, negative news always has a longer tail than we ever want to plan for. People, by definition, plan optimistically. I think we should be very, very conservative with the number of golf rounds. I think we should be very, very conservative with the home sale transactions that we base our APF revenue on. I don't see any downside in planning that way. If we achieve a positive variance on those things, the money drops right to the bottom line. Last comment, in terms of the fully funded balance, I am not concerned about that number drifting downward a little bit below 50%. I don't know if that's in anybody's mind, but I think when you change that decimal point, the first decimal to the right of, or the figure to the right of the decimal point, 5 to 4, it catches some attention. When we, in good years, you put money in the bank. You set the squirrel, the squirrel goes out and gets acorns in the summer to get him through the winter. We've taken several financial hits with our investments over the last couple of years. The market has not been kind to us. And we're facing some very, very large expenses in terms of the irrigation. These are 40-year projects. We have all that money set aside. We've been setting it aside in good years to cover those big humps in our expenses in the irrigation projects. So to spend that now and expect it to go down, I expect it to go down a little bit. The market is not, the history book says the market doesn't stay low forever. It tends to go up over time. I'm very comfortable. The governing board wisely set a range on that of 40% as a floor on that. We're comfortably above that. I don't think that ought to concern us. I don't think we need to put a hedge on top of a hedge. As I remember the consultant study, and I was on this committee at that time, to me, my interpretation was about 30% fully funded balance was really the point where, I was getting very, very uncomfortable with letting the funds go down there. We're comfortably above that. I just have no concerns about the long-term fully funded balance as long as we keep our eye on it. To me, the hill to die on is our membership fees right now. If credit cards segregation is not included, we need to cover it with dues, and we need to pony up and face it. The last comment, I promise, is that has anybody ever thought about creating a couple extra rows on that golf chart, which is really well crafted right now, and you might have trouble squeezing a few more rows in there. But what if you put a row in there, 2 rows in there, one for members, one for outside? They'd call it a super saver rate. Don't call it a credit card. Call it a super saver rate. Have it be a couple bucks below the rate, and put in parentheses, cash only. I'm very sensitive to the comments that Director Stanabine made at the last general governing board meeting when he expressed very eloquently, he expressed some of the concerns about outside play and the importance of that revenue. And nobody at this table, anywhere else in the world, can know what that impact would be of raising those fees. We just all make a guess. And I go back to breaking out those fees in a very simple way for membership and for golf transactions. The big ones, the big ones there, could be done, and it could be done without creating a lot of angst among the people that choose to pay by credit card. I personally will probably still pay by credit card. I like some of the not only the convenience of not carrying the cash, but I like the convenience that when at the end of the month comes, we can get a real nice, easy sortation of all of our expenses. They're categorized very nicely, and I'm willing to pay for that. But some people aren't, and I think life is about choices, and giving a consumer a choice, as opposed to dictating to them what's good for them, is always going to get my first vote. I've said enough. Thank you all for being patient enough to allow me to do that.
Thank you, John. We have one remaining thing that we're going to do. Now, under normal circumstances, it's 2 hours. I would call for a bio break, but I'm not going to. I'm going to ask now for recommendations from our committee. We've heard all of our members, all of the committee members have voiced their positions. And I wish now to provide the opportunity that if we want to make a recommendation, that this would be the time to do it. And I open the floor up for recommendations. Ms. Novello?
There are so many here. I would recommend that we as a community, through the governing board, establish some sort of an index to use as a guiding principle. What that index would be requires some study and thought, but we have a starting point for this year, and we should, the Budget and Finance Committee should really review that, study it in more detail in terms of what's the right index, are there better indices available, et cetera. So I just wanted to segregate. There's so many things on the floor. Can we just...
Could we back up a little bit?
Sure.
Let's first talk about an index.
An index first.
Yeah. I think the question on the floor is, do we support an index?
Right.
And then I think the iteration of that is, which index?
Exactly.
Okay,
I
and
support
then
an
how-
index, and I am in support of what's been presented today as a starting point.
And define that, please.
What's been presented today is a cumulative 10-year or so rolling average. If we had rolled those inflation rates forward, we would have a rate next year of 540, I believe. So I'm in support. I will support that recommendation. It's the CPI rolled forward for the past 10 years.
And I'd like to get a clarification from Mr. Schwind if that was actually rolled forward for 10 years or 3 years.
The slide back up there, if you would. I believe the summer began in 2014.
So it is a
Sorry,
10...
8 years.
So it is
9 years.
Apparently 9 years.
9 years, okay.
We can even just make it more succinct and say that I'm in support of the index as a starting point for the 2023 recommendation being what's shown on slide number 10. It is not, what's being recommended is not a 3-year average this year, because we do have some catch-up that the staff is recommending, and I personally I think that's fair. I support the creation of an index. The right index should be studied next year by Budget and Finance.
Well, this is a
this-
transitional year, so.
Correct.
Anytime you're changing a methodology, the number is, this is a transitional year, so anytime we're talking about changing methodology. Anytime you have a change, and we have to compensate for what has happened in the past. I mean, I think basically looking at the chart before that, the graph, I think last year's rate increase was too low. So in essence, by looking at 6.1% or that higher amount, it's actually correcting what was done in a prior year.
Yeah, I think that let's back up here a little bit. I think that we need our recommendations, maybe they're too full, they're 2 stages, okay? I think we need to have recommendations that we can send to the governing board that will affect this year's budget, okay? So I'd like to be succinct to that. And then I think we can come back and say, and furthermore, we also recommend, so let's take the recommendations that are succinct to this year, okay, and do those. And then if we have others, which would be, in my opinion, it would be, well, let's create our own index, you know. But for this year, let's use CPI. I mean, I'm not trying to put words in anybody's mouth.
No, that's, I think you've crystallized my attempt. I'll try again. My recommendation is that that I support what's been presented. What has been presented is a 9-year average of CPI rolled forward year on year. I support that recommendation for the fiscal year 23-24. Whatever has been, 6.1 is what has, I believe, if you do the math, right? So it would be a dues, it would be the increase to cover all of that. Dick asked us to be succinct, and
So
I'm
we're going-
saying I would support what's shown on slide number 10, which
Okay.
is a 9-year rolling average of CPI. Thank you.
Mr. Friend?
Yes, Terry, can you go back to the grid, please? Again, Mr. Swan developed this, but point of clarification, I just want to point out, in year 2014, year column on the left, our annual dues, column on the right, was $408. Cliff then applied a 2-year average to the 408 to come up with the 420, I believe. And then he carried those forward down to the column, right? So the 2-year average. Yes, so both 2 and 3. Just point of clarification.
Mr. Bosak?
I think we're getting ahead of ourselves here. This idea, when I first heard it, I thought, sounds pretty good. The more I think about it, the more I'm in a quandary about it really backfiring on us sometime in the future. And I think we don't even need to talk about this anymore today. I think a smaller group should get together, do our homework on what the possibilities are. We're trying to create a solution here where there may not be a problem. So, and one of the options at the end may be we don't do anything, but it takes a lot more study than what we're going to wind up being able to do today.
I think that's what I was trying to say earlier, but our chairperson asked us for one statement at a time. I really think if we're going to apply some side, create an index and use one, we should study it.
This is a big deal.
For more, yeah, for more than a week.
Change to the bylaws. The residents are going to have to vote on it, so it needs to be understood in very definitive terms, and we're
Absolutely.
very far away from that.
But for next year, I can understand what the thought that went in, and I can assume since all the assumptions that were baked in here, we're continuing to absorb the credit card fees, et cetera, as a cost of doing business, it makes sense.
Ann?
Thank you, Chairman Rhodes. If we could just simplify this, I think what we really need to do is get this in terms of the current year budget. And that being the case, regardless of the mechanism, I think we've seen what you've talked about in here, Christine, with 3-year average. But I think what we need to do is say that we will support the dues increase to $540. Yes. And I think, and are not supported, but I would say in the form of a statement, I think we just need to get succinct about things like the CPI and indexes and those kind of things are for further discussions. I think we just need to get specific here.
So our recommendation would be very simple, and we would say that the Budget and Finance Committee supports an increase of the dues to $540.
Yes, I think that's what
you want to say.
Yeah, I think that's what Ann is saying.
Okay, so that is recommendation number 1.
Yeah.
Okay? Do we have other recommendations? Oh, I'm sorry.
Can't we take these one at a time? And vote on them?
Okay.
Or not vote?
Yeah, or give a consensus. Let's do a consensus on the recommendation that we support the dues increase to $540. Mr. Bosak?
Yes.
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 No.
Yes.
Okay, so it's 6-1. Okay. Okay. Now, next issue.
I'd like to put this idea forth about the credit card fees. I motion, whatever we want to put it, is that we allow the credit card fees to be absorbed in the expenses this year. That's something that can be studied more in depth going forward. But absorb them for this year along with that dues increase. So that's my recommendation.
Let me read this back. This will be wordsmith, but it's to absorb credit card fees for this year with a stipulation that will be studied for future years.
Well, I don't necessarily need a stipulation in there. I think I'm just looking at this year's budget, but I think if that is going to be addressed in future years, there needs to be more study on it. But I think just for this year, absorb them.
Okay, the absorb credit card fees.
It's
for
an operating expense.
Yeah.
You're just maintaining the status quo, so there's nothing to even.
Yeah, I mean, that's the basis, that's the assumption in Mr. Schwinn's proposed budget.
Yeah.
So you're right, I don't think we need to vote on that.
Okay.
Okay? We don't need to submit a recommendation. Do we have any recommendations on the APFs? Ms. Brown?
Leave them where they've been proposed at 5,000. Yeah, support the proposal. And the same for the golf rounds.
I would like to make an editorial comment about the $5,000 fee. Once we hit $5,000, I guess maybe even $4,700, I think there's an expectation when the new buyers that move in expect that there's going to be a level of acceptable standard. Now, we have that, but I think that will be even reinforced. So. Anything else? Mr. Schwind?
I just have 3 points of clarification. Giving these notes back to Cliff when he arrives, we'll compile all this, have it prepared for a governing board workshop. We talked about a difference between guest and outside play, and I thought that was up there. When we talk about outside play, I think we were going 5-3-1 and then 3-1. Is that under your... Let's go back here. Non-resident.
Non-resident, they're both the same.
You're saying member guest and non-resident is the same?
I'm saying the category on their rate sheet is the same.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So that needs amending? Was that you, Frank?
Yeah, I was the one that brought that up, and so you're proposing, and this is a proposal for different dollar amounts, one for the public and one for member guest, in terms of the increases. In other words, $3, $1 for member guest, but 5, 3, and 1 for public. But on the rate sheet for golf, they all pay the same rate. So either you fix that or you create a new line on the rate sheet. One will say member guest, the other will just say outside play.
Okay. Good, thank you. Range balls. We talked about the fact that our machines currently would have a problem differentiating between who you are, and they do. Potentially with the new cards coming in, that might fix that problem, right? But moving forward, go ahead.
Well, okay, so when you buy a key now, right, you can buy a key if you're a public person, you can buy a key if you're a resident. You pay a different rate.
Right.
What I was talking about, okay, so we're going to get rid of keys and we're going to go to cards. But those cards, I assume, would operate the same way as a key.
No, they're individual to you.
Well, no, but you can, what I meant was, if you buy a card as a public member, you'll probably pay one price, just like you pay for a key now. If you're a resident member, you would pay a different price, a lower price for the card.
Yes.
The challenge comes when you pay cash. I'm assuming the new machines will accept cash. Maybe they won't.
We believe they do.
Okay. So again, if you're a resident and you go down and you choose not to buy a key and you have to pay for cash,
Okay.
if that's where the disconnect comes.
Good point. Okay, thank you. And lastly, I'm sorry, golf carts, 16, 18, where are we? Recommendation-wise?
I'd leave it where it's at 18.
Mr. Vignato?
I'd like to make a recommendation that continue the $18 rate for non-residents, but perhaps go to $16 for residents. And I don't think that much revenue is going to be lost by doing that, because while there are residents that do occasionally rent golf carts, I don't think that the sum total of that amount of money after a year is really material. So the recommendation would be that they establish a resident rate for golf cart rentals of $16 and keep the $18 rate in effect, even though my friends hate it.
You want to get a,
My recommendation, although I wasn't asked, my recommendation is that we ask our colleagues and fellow owner members in the golf committee to take a look at this, and I would like to hear from them. I don't see, from what I've heard, I didn't listen to all four of the past, but the last one, I believe they've recommended something different. So with due respect to the knowledge that's of our staff, I would like to hear, I'd really recommend that we look at the golf committee as another source of knowledge. Thank you.
That we can do a recommendation for that. We can, Mr. Swing.
They recommended an $18 fee, and I would support the golf committee's recommendation.
Yeah. I don't know that we need to recommend a validation of that.
Good, almost afternoon. The recommendations came out of the golf committee because the golf committee was pretty leery about getting over the $90 mark for outside guests. When you going to $68 plus the $18 plus the sales tax that we now charge for outside guests, you're getting up over $91. So the idea of reducing the rate from 531, or from what it was to 531, 753, something like that, and reducing $2 off the golf cart rate was to get that final number down closer to $85, $86. So that's what the thinking was, to combine those two, just so that we don't scare away other outside players, because it is such an important part to us. So that was kind of the thinking that went around those two moves. Thank you.
Thank you. And in what meeting did that come up? I'd missed it, Tim.
No, it didn't come up at a meeting. This came up from Harry, the chairman of that committee.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
So.
Thank you.
So where are we with this? Do we need to do anything? Huh? Yeah, I don't think there's a recommendation there.
Sounds like I'm in support of the discussions that have already taken place.
Do we have any other discussion? So if not, we have one recommendation that will come out of BNF, and that recommendation will be that the BNF supports a dues increase of $540. Okay, we're going to take a vote on that. Start a consensus. Start with you, Christine.
we did already
We already did.
We did?
Dick.
Thank you very much. It has been a long meeting, by the way, folks, okay? I just wanted, yeah, that was my fault. I just wanted to be thorough, okay?
Dick, would you entertain a couple of philosophical comments?
Yes?
Okay.
Miller?
I watched this process over the months of trying to develop the budget. And I'm very mindful of what I perceive personally as the fiasco of last year's budget in the meeting that the board had in May. It was embarrassing, frankly. I watched this iteration, and I really wonder whether we're starting the discussions early enough. Okay? You know, we live by this cycle of September to May because that's when people leave and people come back, okay? I really question whether that's the right thing to do. I would suggest that we really need to start the budget process earlier. You know, you gave me the assignment to review the planning process for the budget, and one of the recommendations I made was have the general manager tell us what the process was. And frankly, you know, I think in some ways we're making up the process as we go along. Okay? So I really think we need to step back and take a different look at that. The other thing that's been reinforced multiple times is that we really have two major financial levers here in the community. We have dues and we have golf. Now, I got a little cranky in one of the meetings earlier when all of a sudden the golf committee came back and recommended this rate increase, which was news to me. Okay, and I understand, and Tim, wherever Tim went, okay, you know, came back and said all committees are equal, and I understand that. But I think, frankly, if golf is that important a revenue source that it impacts the other considerations that we have, that we need to have Pat O'Hara come in here in addition to him talking to the golf committee and tell us what their thinking is, rather than us having to go out and watch 4 hours worth of YouTube videos to try and find out what the thinking is. Now, maybe the board understands that, but I don't think this committee necessarily does. So I really think that we need to have a better dialogue between what's happening with how we see our golf business. And I'll go back to a comment I made earlier. I don't understand what our business model is for golf. Okay, and I'd really like to have that written down on a piece of paper someplace that says, here's what our business model is. Here's who our outside player target group is. You know, who is it? Who are we trying to attract? Portobello people, Grand people, because they can use their golf carts? If that's the case, then how we raise our golf cart rates is immaterial. Okay, so I really think that it would benefit us to frame the broader financial thinking for the community if we had more access to that information as it's being developed as opposed to after the fact. Thanks.
I think those are all reasonable requests. Yeah. So let's go ahead and begin with committee comments. Mr. Bosak?
Wouldn't dare. I got 4 or 5, but I'm not gonna.
Anything else, Mr. Miller? Susan?
No.
Ann?
I've said enough.
I have 2. First of all, I regard this as an excellent meeting. A public airing of different opinions. That's how you shake out and filter things and come to a very good final decision. Secondly, I would like to endorse Dr. Miller's comments.
Thank you. Mr. Bernardo?
A little earlier, John had mentioned that there is a lot of revenue coming in that's not dues or APF related. Is that correct, John? You did an analysis? Refresh my memory, everybody's memory.
Other revenue would include everything that was not membership fee. So that would be user fees, ancillary, merchandise, A to Z.
Got it. So the word I was looking for was, John,
All
had used,
other.
was user fees. David, a couple of weeks ago, also kind of danced around the third rail of passing along costs, and not just credit card fees, but other costs to where the costs are generated from. As an example, and Bill, you may know the answer to this question, what's the water bill for the Ag Club? Or maybe Pete knows.
No, offhand, I don't want to shoot a number out, but I can definitely get it.
Okay. And so, as I understand the way the Ag Club works, if it's correct, the people who grow their vegetables don't pay a water bill. Is that right?
100% correct, sir.
I'd imagine that water bill is an awful lot of money. And so maybe it's time to have a little bit more of a shift in the way costs are allocated in the community so that we start to reduce a little bit of the subsidization. The club members are not going to like it, but then maybe I shouldn't have to pay a greens fee and that gets subsidized too, if you catch my drift. In other words, I think that the clubs need to start contributing a little bit more towards the cost of carrying them. That recreation division, if I remember correctly in this package, is running about a $6 million a year deficit. That's an awful lot of subsidization.
They say there's 3 drains in the bottom of the pool. One's for water, 2's for money.
I have one of those. Ms. Novello?
I think David had mentioned a short time ago that we need to start, I believe you had said, we should be, as a community, starting some of this budget review earlier as a process. I don't have an answer, but I agree with you. If I could agree with you more than 100%, I would. It's more about a question, we're talking today, indices and so forth. We need some leading indicators. How are we doing? That fully funded balance is really important to every one of us. In any event, we need to take a little bit more of a step back and look more cohesively as a budget and finance committee and as an overall community about looking forward and being more fully educated. That would be my biggest comment on everything that we've been talking about. We've got a lot of places to start. I think, we should be unafraid. We're not establishing a new policy. Anne said it very well. This is something that we can look at establishing next year, perhaps. But today, we're not establishing a new policy. We're not setting some kind of a new precedent. We made, with everybody's contributions, we made some very succinct recommendations for governing board review. And we have an opportunity next year to study them more deeply. And I hope we take that opportunity.
Now I'd like to call for any comments from those present here in the room today. We do have one. We have perhaps 2. Okay. And if you'd identify yourself with your rec number, please.
Bill Weaver, 124087. This is just a comment regarding, the discussions and discussing about how we pay for things. And I understand, the dues net and paying for things, but what I think gets mixed into the mix too often are new capital. What pays for new capital? We've got an asset preservation fund that preserves assets. We have dues that's for expenses. What actually funds the capital expenses for new? Are the new capital people who are going to use it, are they going to pay for that and are they going to build that? And then the other thing is investments. Who is going to fund our investment losses? There are still signs of recession in the air. I would caution about new spending on anything that is new capital. Thank you.
I would like to follow up, and I'm going to look to Pete, and I don't want a response now, but I would like to have an explanation for that gentleman on the on the flow of where the money would come from and how we would handle that. Okay? So, well, if you could do it briefly, yes, but
So Cliff mentions all the time, and I couldn't agree more, it's all about the reserve fund.
okay.
So we have modeling that takes us out 5 years. I honestly think that that message has started to resonate. You see Bill and Cliff's slides that start to now talk about not the end of year, not 1 year out, but 5 years out, because you're going to have fluctuations. To the specific topic of our investments and the valuation change, I do hear a lot of people mention 1 year. 1 year in 2022 in which the association took a considerable impact. What they don't mention is the 3-4 years before that, in which there was almost $6 million added over a 4-year period of time. Just for FYI, and I think this was more for you, Ann, that you were concerned in this committee that at the last meeting we had recognized about a $700,000 negative valuation in February, and that had dropped our projected to 48%, and you were saying, well, is that going to factor into the budgeting ebb and flow? 1 year, 1 month later, we're now back to a year-to-date even. And if you value our investment policy over time, that 90-10 ratio is designed to be very much conservative in valuation changes. It's one time in 40 years that the bond markets see a 10+%. One time. And that was last year. Now we're going to change all of our investment strategies to reflect that. The normal range is 2 or 3% on either side of zero. So back to the investments. The valuation change into our modeling is zero. We don't know. And that's the way it should be. What you do see is our investment income. And the investment income is well positioned to draw off of the interest of that 90% bonds. At the beginning of the year, which I hear referenced a lot, in the beginning of 22, the rate was 0.5%. So on roughly 30 million, you're earning 300 grand a year. Our bond portfolio now is every month buying and watching old of the mutual funds sell off, and they're buying new at the 4 and 4.5% rate. We're now seeing $800,000 of earnings. We will not see that go away. It's going to slowly slip back down if rates come down. And so we positioned the earnings in the modeling to be good. That represents about roughly 5 to 10% of the inflows. The big kahuna in the room, and I hear a lot of people mentioning it, is APS. That the roughly 3,500 stood as a baseline for 3-4 years. Didn't move at all. And mostly that was trafficked around the investment income was doing so well, and operations was contributing $2 million. It was like, why do we even need to touch it? But we saw our competitors, the two around us, and start to model their rate increases. We saw the housing sales, and I think that was very wise to capture those monies. It filled the coffers to offset some of the investment income last year. So it represents about 70 to 75% of our inflows. The last, and this is the one that Cliff's done a great job this year of explaining, is that the operating margin is viewed as profit to some 1 or 5 or whatever, 50% of the membership had this profit. It's not profit. Your policy actually says that it is infused into the reserve funds. So it represents a very strong portion of your future modeling. And dues represents the most, impactful item within the revenue stream, so naturally it gets the most attention. I hear a lot of people referencing concerns about what levers change. The one thing that I think Cliff has communicated throughout this a lot is that the dues is your one foundational revenue source that you can absolutely count on. There's going to be 29,000 people that are going to pay that in, and it goes right to the bottom line. We've been hearing people talk about golf rounds. What if that went way down or up in a recession, up or down, whether or not? And so the operating margin, though, is very, very important for about 10 or 15% of our future repair and replacement. That you want to make sure that you're doing that today. You want to make sure that your fees are not evaporated away by the cost side. You want to have that steady, and that's why I think the discussion about tying it to our cost might be the right way to go.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. Sir, your name and your rec number, please?
Yeah, it's Nick Turner, 131829. I'm a member of the Chartered Clubs Committee. I'm also an officer of one of the card clubs here. I'd just like to make it clear I'm speaking as an individual and not representing them in any way. I was pleased that you've deferred the credit card surcharge discussion and are not going to impose that next year, because I do agree that needs a lot of thought. And it's also reduced what I want to say by about 75%. I moved here because of the clubs, and passing on more costs to clubs will have an effect on those clubs and their viability and the number of clubs that we have as a result. Charging for the water which is used by the agricultural clubs and other clubs is an idea of reducing the subsidy, but on the same count, are you going to charge water fitness an additional fee because of the heating of the pool for the times that they use it? You could open up a whole can of worms and discussions about fairness and equality across the clubs. And if you do start reducing the subsidies, you'll have fewer clubs, and this will be a less attractive place. Fully funded balance. The policy is 40%. If it falls from 50 to 47 because of 2 lean years when we've got very high capital expenses, don't panic. And indexes. The longer the period you use, if you're using indexes as a rule about what you can and cannot do, means you are less able to adapt when it comes to, if we have a 15% inflation spike, but the 10-year average rate of inflation is 3%, you're in trouble. So use indexes as a guide, but don't use them as a rule. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. That was very, very wise advice, I might add. So thank you very much. So it is 11:42. We have been here 2 hours and 42 minutes. I think we've set another record. Not proud of it. So at that, this meeting is adjourned.
Great.